Hi, and welcome to today's event. I'm excited and honored to be with great company today for our annual Sustainability in Logistics event hosted by Redwood Logistics. I'm Nate Greenspan, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. I am a product leader here in Chicago working with Redwood Logistics, including driving our sustainability strategies and products like Redwood Hyperion, our freight emissions accounting solution. I'm joined by our panelists today, Jesse Ortiz with the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council and Travis Vedral with Univar Solutions, two colleagues with diverse experience where we'll be discussing practices on setting sustainable objectives, initiatives and their impacts, and common challenges faced on this journey. Travis, Jesse, let's have you both introduce yourselves. And Travis, if you could get us started, please.
Yeah, no, Nate, thank you again for having me. I'm excited for today. We're going to have a great time. But yes, Senior Director here of Univar Solutions. Univar Solutions is a leading global chemical and fine ingredient distributor with a really purpose to redefine distribution and be the most valued chemical and fine ingredients distributor. So again, happy to be here. Love this subject. Let's dive into it.
Awesome. Jesse?
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Jessie Servi Ortiz. I am the managing director of what's called the Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council. We're a member organization and we support businesses on their sustainability journey. Been working in sustainability in various ways for over 20 years, kind of from grassroots, kind of living on permaculture farms around the globe to in 2013, I earned my MBA. So I grew up in a family of business, so I really spoke business language, and it made sense for me when I wanted to sort of give back to work within the business community. So that's what I do today, really helping a variety of businesses across sizes and sectors really get their sustainability programs up off the ground and adding value to their business.
That's great. Yeah, I really love the mission that you have at Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council. It's great to have you both. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started with a high-level umbrella question that captures a lot of, I think, how people start on their journeys, right? Which is, what are your organization's overarching sustainability goals and objectives? Jesse, I know for you, that's both your objectives and how you work with businesses and other entities on their objectives. Maybe if we can start with you, and we can think also how we can relate this into supply chain activities.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to accelerate the integration of sustainable principles and practices through business. So really that looks like supporting and equipping both sustainability professionals themselves with the tools and resources that they need to be impactful and successful in their jobs. And then also helping the businesses themselves help sustainability add value to their organization. So we sort of measure our sustainability and success in a variety of ways, which are things like number of businesses served. We look at engagement and retention metrics. We look at number of sustainability professionals and the communities that they serve. When we're talking about like impact metrics, we do track our own greenhouse gas primarily through our events. We host one big annual event every year where we track the carbon footprint of the event and offset that. And we're looking at how we're mostly a remote organization. So we're looking at maybe capturing that broader as well. And, this topic is kind of around supply chain. One of the programs that we are currently in the process of actually launching because of the need and the work that we've done is a sustainable supplier consortium. So really, this is a program where we help companies engage their suppliers in the conversation around sustainability. Because so many times, when companies get asked questions to do things, they don't know what they don't know, right? And they don't really know how to get started. They might be getting a variety of questions from a variety of different customers. And so we really help them determine what is the most important things to measure and sort of give them really the education and the tools to set up a program, again, that is impactful to their organization and their business. And so a lot of times what we're measuring in terms of sustainability success are, environmental and social metrics, things that are like greenhouse gas baseline, water use, energy efficiency through normalization metrics, things like waste diversion or percent diverted from the landfill. So those are the types of metrics that we're helping businesses set up and track on their own.
Which for folks early in their journey, setting those kind of metrics and targets, getting started is always such a large hurdle. I think it's really awesome that they can go to organizations like yourself, supporting your metrics, but then also getting them going with establishing, to the root of the question there, their objectives, their goals. Travis, how about with you at Univar?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. As Jesse spoke about the communities they serve, and at Univar, we take a very large holistic approach to ESG, and sustainability is one sliver. And I would just ask that everybody listening go check out our website to get a broader picture of all the great things that we've done through the years and our overarching goals. But specific to climate action and greenhouse gases, that's where really I play a major role in that laser focus. And our goals for 2025 are a 20% reduction of absolute CO2 and a 40% reduction by 2030, ultimately striving to that net zero by 2050. And so we've got some very large tasks, and we're happy with the progress we've made. But really where I come into play is part of my function leading both our private fleet as well as our third-party carrier procurement from an asset management model, but also as well a capacity management model. We have a significant direct impact to the both scope 1 and scope 3 of our emissions control, and really diving into the scope 1 with a broader impact more globally due to the private fleet impact with the CO2 and the greenhouse gas emissions is really where I started cutting my teeth in this space and learned a lot through the years and continue to be dynamic with the ever evolving environment.
Yeah, that's great. Travis, I'd love to click in something that we've experienced at Redwood and have worked with our customers on solutions from an asset capacity perspective. It's balancing from a cost to benefit perspective. And when we think about the costs of identifying transportation partners, your providers, your assets, how you want to make investments into those, what at a high level, still thinking kind of from that objective kind of level down of starting to hit at a project implementation perspective, do you start to think about the cost to benefits ratios, overcoming those typical objections?
Yeah, and there's a lot that we can talk about on this front. And ultimately, you have to continue to make the best decisions for the organization at the time. And, before we dive into more tangible action items, I would say many people think that there's a future technology that's going to be present that's going to solve all the problems, and it's a one size fits all. And my argument to that is, one, we have plenty of bridge technologies that you can take action now that are not a significant investment, although there are those significant investments that you have to measure both cost and return. But two, there's never going to be a one size fits all, in my opinion. I believe there's going to always be different business application. And so how we've taken this very large challenge and broken this down into what I would call tangible action items is really into three core pillars inside the transportation sector. And, pillar number one is what we consider minimizing miles. What are those actions we can do now, or those decisions we can make that drive payload management, modal management, network optimization? Number two is efficient equipment. That's our second key pillar, and that's where we'll talk a lot today. But the efficient equipment is, what are those current technologies that can drive alternative fueling programs? What are the different synthetic fuel additives you can add to your current assets? And then third, again, another key you can take action now is just targeted training. How are we educating the group of individuals that are impacting our current climate emissions? How are we educating on driving behaviors? How are we educating on braking behaviors? How are we educating those leaders that are leading those front lines? But to dive deeper into your question, how do you measure the return versus the business? And if I split this two ways into one, an asset management model, but two, a capacity management model. From an asset management model, I think you have to understand a multi-tiered gating process that then turns into a proof of concept, and that then turns into a pilot, and in a very extended long period of time that you have to validate your results, validate what you're purchasing into, and continue to expand from there. And we can dive deeper as you choose. But from a capacity management model, I would argue this is this is very similar to any current capacity managed model. We are already diving into the benefits of cost versus service, into investing in those carriers and business partners that are investing in themselves. So we know that they're going to be here for the long run. I believe this just becomes another characteristic of which of these carriers are driving more efficiency. There may be cost in the front end, but ultimately this is a partnership that will drive dividends both for myself, but also for them, because their costs will start to come down as their investments continue to take way and they become more effective and efficient in the sustainable area. So again, we can get deeper, but I think that hits home for now.
Yeah, totally. And we're going to be talking about some initiatives that both Jesse, Travis, you have ongoing or have had experience with through your respective perspectives. And I'm excited to hear more about both of those. I even just took a quick note on the 3 pillars that you mentioned, Travis, because I love the way that you're framing it up of minimize miles, efficient equipment, and training. From conversations with SmartWay representatives, I recognize that they have some playbooks out there that they have invested in that really align to those 3 pillars. In our experience, those are absolutely essential when working with our customers. And another that I would add, and maybe we could argue perhaps it falls into these buckets, but from where the business rules around the freight of the commodities that are moving, thinking if you could do modal shift and always try to move up the ladder into a more efficient mode of transportation. But when you're talking about your assets and the carriers and existing operations and how you optimize, this hits the nail on the head. So I really love what you guys are doing. I'd love to talk about maybe some specific initiatives within either your business or Jesse, your member organizations, and how those are impacting their carbon footprints. Jesse, maybe if we can start with you with some of your experiences.
Yeah, one of the things that Travis just said really stood out to me, which is there's no one size fits all. And that's so true in sustainability. And it sometimes can be really frustrating, but it's it's worth taking the time to really analyze, right, what's going to work for your business. And so that's the approach that we really take to tracking and measuring and helping businesses set up systems for making sure that they're tracking the right thing and their overall impact, right? Because we want it to be important to the business, be meaningful to what their culture is, to what their organizational strengths are, but also meet customer and stakeholder demands, right? So everything kind of relates to that, and materiality is the way that we look at that in sustainability. So we always recommend when thinking about greenhouse gas reduction that you start with the low-hanging fruit. So greenhouse gas relates to energy, right? So have an energy audit for your facility. If you have a facility, you can, in Wisconsin, we have a great program called Focus on Energy, but there are organizations in every state that usually can support those types of things, or have a fleet assessment, right? If it is specific to your fleet. I know Clean Cities is an organization we have a Wisconsin version of, that's national. There are programs through the DOE that you can reach out to. A lot of times, some of these are grant supported, so you can get free assessments on occasion. So definitely start there. And then improve efficiency, right? It's like we're not jumping to alternative fuels or alternative energy right away. We're really looking at how are you operating, getting a baseline, and then looking at improving efficiency. So where are those efficiency measures? You can look at alternative energy sources or fuels. That often can maximize or shorten the ROI on an investment. I'm sure Travis could speak way more in detail about that. And then, when it comes down to some specifics, I know we had one business that is a manufacturer that just by doing an energy assessment, looking at the machine level, transferring some load capacities, looking at efficiency options, and then automating some things, as well as adding a building automation system was able to save over $1 million in dollars, but then think about what that equated to in terms of greenhouse gas. Another example I can share is a global ingredient manufacturer that's a member of ours. We host Greenhouse Gas Working Group. So just recently, she shared some details about sort of what they're working on. And they have a carbon neutral goal for 2030. They looked at scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 and understood what the percent of each of those was. So scope 3, they wanted to have reductions of 30%. Is the goal that they set, and then net zero in all scopes by 2045. And their materiality process that I sort of spoke to is what helped them identify some of this. But they also realized that scope 3 was their largest area. So in their process, they realized that 25% of their scope was 25% came from scope 1. That's the consumed fuels by the sources that they control. 17% was scope 2, so indirect purchased electricity, and then 58% was scope 3. So that's a large percentage. Over half of their greenhouse gas emissions is coming from scope 3. So if you're not super familiar with what that means, it's a variety of upstream and downstream sources. They were able to break that down and understanding that 63% of that came from purchased goods, 11% came from upstream transportation, and 26% came from waste and wastewater. So then they were able to hone in on that. Okay, what can we do about the 11% upstream transportation, right? And so then they were able to look at building efficiencies. They used EPA approved formulas to sort of look at ways that they could reduce that over the long term. And so they were looking at things like the distances that they were traveling, the load size. I mentioned emissions factors. So you mentioned the SmartWay program, Nate. That's a good program that can support. They also used US Ave. I'm not sure I don't know much about that program.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that either.
Okay. So maybe that's a point we can look up after.
What you need to do as well.
Yeah. And then how much is delivered each year. And so while they still have ways to go on the journey, they have sort of evaluated at a deep level sort of what is necessary to get to these goals that they're setting. So I just thought that was kind of a good example that sort of related to the work sometimes that's needed upfront to get to greenhouse gas efficiency and emissions reductions.
Yeah, having been the person on our scope 1 and 2 emissions, having been our point on a great program that was sponsored by one of our clients called Supplier Leadership of Climate Transition. We did get a baseline on our scope 3 as well earlier this year. So I can say it is certainly a challenge. For folks who maybe have not measured or not so familiar with scope 1, 2, and 3, typically freight moved on your assets are going to fall under that scope 1 umbrella. And then anything that is going to be moved through 3PL, 4PL providers, that upstream, downstream transportation categories of scope 3 will be in that scope 3 bucket. I think it's awesome, Jesse, how you're able to support your business entities that are part of your organization in really identifying what are those major first step hurdles. We did the same thing, same guidance we received on, starts with materiality assessment, starts with reduction diagnostics, and then from there you can start to target based on my business, my strengths, where can we start to take impact. I think that's really incredible. I think the use cases you shared are great too. Travis, would love to hear about you and your experiences as well.
Yeah, Jesse, preach. The assessment is key. And I've got to really send kudos to the broader ESG team here at Univar Solutions, because even prior to me really diving into this space, head first, their ability to assess everything from our up and down supply chain to facilities to opportunities is really what then passed the ball to me to say, hey, we have opportunities here. What can we go do? And I think just naturally research is key. Research, collaborate, and educate. And we take a very firm approach here with collaboration. And so, I've got a couple of items that I'm proud of here within the industry specific, where, we understand within our scope 1 private fleet, we have a very large opportunity to tackle. And that took a lot of immediate research. What technology was available? And I kind of laid out those 3 pillars, but outside of those pillars, we then have an integration type process where after we researched and understood what technologies were available, we always worked for a demo. There was many partners in this space that, hey, we need to understand what is this new alternative fueling asset? How does it work? How does it work with our business application? Our business is not necessarily that standard CPG or over-the-road driver. Many of our specifications for our assets require high power pumping. We are moving hazardous material, so we have to ensure intrinsically safe items out on the road. And so by identifying the different technologies available and executing demos, we were able then to validate, okay, where does this technology align with our business application? And then that also took us kind of that next gating criteria of, okay, in this geography where we have business application alignment, are there infrastructure needs? What is the infrastructure investment cost? And then you just continue to peel back that onion to third of, okay, what does this cost? Is there opportunity with grants, as Jesse alluded to and called out? And so very happy to state, going through this rigorous process of not only identifying that this is a right business case, but then diving deeper into change management. Does the community want this? Does the employee community want this? Are they bought into it? And again, that's where kudos to the collaboration of our team, just always moving in stride and communicating together. But we effectively took a very large leap, and we were one of the first entries into alternative fuel vehicles in a specific geography of the country that is new within our industry. So we are running both electric vehicles in a certain part of the United States, as well as, again, business application, renewable natural gas vehicles. So it's interesting to us that there is no one size fits all. We are tackling 2 different alternative technologies, and we're running them with different business applications so that we can, again, further take that demo into our proof of concept where we're currently in. We're measuring the results, validating that what we assumed during our assessments are holding true. We're also learning new headwinds and new tailwinds. And again, further educating the community to ensure that they're seeing the results, that our employment group is seeing the results. So very happy to speak about that on the scope 1. And then pivoting to scope 3, as Jesse called out, scope 3 is piece to tackle, and collaboration is key because that's going to be upstream, downstream, vendors, suppliers, et cetera. And for our scope 3, we have a vision. We don't necessarily have the answer, but we have a vision, and we understand it's going to take collaboration. And so what we're currently working on is we're working to better understand what is our footprint currently? What are our vendors doing, both from a sustainability footprint? Are they investing in themselves? Are they certified with SmartWay? Or do they have other certifications that we can lean on? And so we're creating just an overall view of who are the partners that are taking this serious and how do we want to invest in them so that in the future we have this vision per se of how do we integrate some type of decision-making matrix inside of our systems, both the TMS or a procurement system that helps us identify maybe a cost threshold of, yes, carrier A may be slightly more expensive in the realm of this opportunity, but this carrier is going to be here for the long run. They are investing in themselves. They're investing in new technologies. We know there is a collaborative benefit with working with this carrier. How do we ingest that information and turn this into a decision? And I find it fascinating because the public currently can go onto Google and search flights, and you start to see that data being more apparent already. So how do we make the data more apparent for our key decision makers to then build process around where I can decide, do I want to pay more money for a different flight because I can see there is a significant reduction? And that's putting the decision in the consumer's hands. And so we have this vision that we're working towards. It's still a bit foggy, but we'll leave it at that for now.
Having just booked flights for an October trip, I was looking at that feature for carrier selection for as a passenger flight. There's no reason why we shouldn't be looking at that from a carrier selection perspective for the freight that we're moving. There's a couple of thoughts that comes to mind from this conversation. I've heard from many customers and folks I've engaged with that scope 3 can be anywhere from 60 to 90% of their total emissions. It's also the most nebulous because you're typically getting into not your supply, not your operations, right? By nature of the upstream, downstream definition of what scope 3 is, it's your providers of your supply chain, their operations, and how can they work with you? Something that some of our customers, besides requiring being Smart Way partner, they're now even looking to enforce certain ranking levels, and taking those Smart Way ranking levels. Not, Travis, that I'm asking for you to start asking of our brokerage team more requirements, but those are progressive steps that I'm seeing out there. Something else that you said is you're taking that discovery-led and then through metrics and the output metrics approach to proof of life, proof of concept, iterating into scale, which really speaks to my product mindset. And I think that's exactly how we should be looking into making organizational change management, because we're not talking about trivial things here. There's investments that are involved. And whenever I have these conversations, perspectives on electric vehicles, biofuel alternative to internal combustion engine comes up. So I think it's great that you're able to take that approach. I'm curious, is that what you feel has been one of the key points? Maybe, again, there's no silver bullets here, but maybe one of the key areas that has led to the success that you've seen so far in those kind of project implementations, because folks, these are questions that I get asked regularly.
Yeah, I'm gonna unpeel that a bit. Forcing is in my mind not ever the right thing to do, right? It's always the carrot versus the stick. And when we think of partnerships, both upstream, downstream, from a vendor selection in the transportation space to our own asset vendor selection for new alternative fuels, it's really about driving our overall mission of who are the partners that want to help us continue to succeed in keeping our communities healthy, fed, safe, and clean. And sustainability is ultimately a part of that mission of we want to ensure that the community engagement is recognizing all the advancements. And so going through that process, you start to identify those partners of who are willing to do so. And as you ask more specifically, yes, I do believe, you never want to just jump into something new, and you need to do your own research, and you need to engage with the frontline teams and the local teams, and you need to educate to win. And many of our values of together we win and valuable to others really sing that mantra here. And so that is what drove the success. It was not jumping into something and being forced by the stick, but understanding there's opportunities and there's ways to do this the right way that win for everyone. And the change management aspect was key. So breaking the larger problem down into steps. And again, we're very early in this journey still. We've got a long way to go, but we're happy with the approach we're taking.
That's awesome. I think that's great experience that can serve as some guidance for some of our listeners. With the projects that have been implemented, I think just you went into some of the benefits already that your businesses that are a part of your organization have been observing. So I'd love to hear if there's any further kind of measurable benefits. Just you already had mentioned some, but anything else that you'd want to add, or Travis, to measurable, or I'll say intangible, because there's other benefits that maybe aren't easy to just throw a quantitative KPI against, that you've seen from your initiatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to give kudos to Travis, because I feel like their process is such a great example that can be replicated, right? Like, you're not just going to jump out and change all your processes and systems and technologies tomorrow, right? But starting small, testing it out, getting the data, doing the proof of concept, like, that's the whole point. And that's why we call sustainability a journey, right? Because it is doing that in different areas of the business kind of over and over until it becomes integrated. So we see over and over, we work with a lot of manufacturers in our organization. And so, just reduced operating costs is one of like the biggest areas that a lot of times they're surprised by. And those costs sometimes can be upwards of 60% operational costs. So, that's not pocket change when you're talking to business operations. And so that age-old saying of you can't manage what you don't measure, really comes into play. A lot of times sustainability is an umbrella of taking a lot of what an organization is already doing and just kind of looking at it from a different lens, right? So again, data is really important. Look at the data that will help inform sort of your decisions. Let's see. I think also another one we see a lot is improved customer experience. We get a lot of customers or organizations that come to us because customers of theirs are asking for things from them that they don't understand. And through that, we've also seen a lot of collaborations take place and a lot of, conversations that might not have happened had that not already or had that requirement not been, or that question not been asked. So many of the businesses that are operating in supply chains are facing sort of increased requirements. And so if that's you and you're feeling yourself in that position, just know that you're not alone. And it's okay, because a couple of years ago, it was kind of a nice to have thing. We're kind of moving to the point where it's table stakes, right? Where you need to kind of start looking at how you're going to address some of these issues in your business. And that really does depend on your industry and the customers that you're serving. So, if you're serving the European market, you're probably getting a lot more of those questions than if you're not. And really understanding what your customers' needs are can improve that, right? They're not just asking you to be annoying. I mean, maybe you see it that way, but just don't feel like you just have to respond, right? Ask them, turn the question back to them, understand what their needs are, what their goals are, what they're working on, and how that might be an opportunity for your business to improve in some way. I did just want to share one example of a small metals manufacturer that we worked with that had about 200 employees and $100 million in revenue. They had a key customer, so 50% of their annual sales had asked them to do EcoVadis. If you don't know what that is, it's like a disclosure framework that a lot of larger companies will ask their suppliers to fill out. Well, they sort of shot from the hip, got really poor score, and we're at risk of losing this business. And so they engaged with us to just set up the systems in place to get better data, to better track, to bring this, large concept of an umbrella sort of into more focus. And they were able to dramatically increase their score within 1 year. And through that process, they achieved a partner level status with that key supplier. And so now they have a great relationship. They sort of have won some awards from them, and they've sort of moved into this preferred provider sort of context. And so that's not only reassurance, but that's sustainability at its core, right? Making sure your business is going to be around for the long haul. I mean, 50% of business is a huge risk. So, if you have a customer that does serve a large percent of your business, then, I would definitely recommend you start thinking about some of these things.
Yeah, I admire everything that you just stated there. Reduced OpEx, improved customer experience. I mean, what else are we here to do besides, at the end of the day, serve our customers and hope that that is going to have returns for our organization in a financially sustainable long-term way. I also will say, from an EcoVadis perspective, we have gone through that journey as well. And Travis, you can take this as another requirement that I've seen from some of our customers. We may even be connected on EcoVadis through that network, but requiring even specific scores to be a transportation provider for some of our shipper customers. So can completely relate to that experience, Jesse, that the company you worked with in that use case had gone through. And our first time going through EcoVadis, it's a large effort, but it acted as a forcing mechanism for Redwood to really introspect on a lot of different dimensions across ESG, where we already were looking into our ESG strategies and how we could be putting our best foot forward for our people and our communities and the environment. But it really allowed us an opportunity, I call it, to start to introspect and through the platform that helps you give you guidance and where you can make improvements. So we continue to improve our EcoVadis score, continue to score, I think it's like a medal system. So I'll get awards and get the medals through EcoVadis. So we're able to really meet the levels of execution from ESG that's expected from many of our customers today. So I think there's a lot of great things there to be said, Jesse. That's awesome. Travis, I'd love to hear from you what you've seen are some of the key benefits.
Everything Jesse said was spot on. Probably best not to repeat. OpEx, customer satisfaction, customer engagement. I think that's just another key item here. And where I will dive and then add more to is the conversation, just having this collaboration, this conversation. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what other people are doing or what their perspective or their benefit is. And so many of those conversations have led to new creative ways, which is refreshing. It's engaging. And when you have that same level of engagement, even with your employment group and your front line, you start to see we're providing them new solutions where, let's say a driver has been in the same type of asset for the past 15 years. This driver's incredible. They're incredibly safe, and safety first with everything we do here. We've actually found out some of these new fueling technologies or some of these new behaviors drive more safety. So now we're driving a safer group out on the road. We're keeping our communities safer. Our community engagement is seeing it. And so we've seen increased employee engagement during some of these new integration type events. We've seen excitement, creativity, and refreshing conversations, both with vendors, suppliers, customers, et cetera, just trying to advance this conversation. And just overall, again, the education. And what I find fascinating in our specific industry and line of work is many of these potential opportunities create this circular supply chain, which then we're delivering certain products that are creating alternative fuels that we're then using to execute the supply chain with. And there's nothing more sustainable than that in my mind. And so, again, having this collaboration, this education, EcoVadis, all the different certifications, I know we're going to dive into a little bit later, but yes, Jesse hit it head on. And the only key thing I would add is many of these things drive further safety and community engagement.
Yeah. Completely agreed. From a community perspective, Travis, I know something that's come up in our previous conversations as well is from a employee engagement perspective, not necessarily externally from a community perspective, but even internally as well, that companies within our organizations want to know our identity. Who are we? And that's something I'm really proud of at Redwood, and I know both of you are within your organizations as well. We talked about data a couple of minutes ago, or not just the metrics, but the access to accuracy, how we actually get to reporting. And I'd love to hear from you both a little bit about how you ensure accuracy, transparency around your sustainability reporting.
Yeah. Jesse, go ahead.
Either way. Yeah, sure. I'll jump in. So yeah, it looks a little different for us sometimes, right? But really, again, how we help companies is like building out those systems for ongoing collection and management of the data. Somebody's got to own it. Somebody has to be looking at it on a regular basis. It has accountability over it. Typically, there's a verification process in place, whether that's internal or external. It can be through certification, or it can, I've seen a lot of companies that just have a team internally that will, verify some of the data. For manufacturers, we see a lot of like waste and energy being really important metrics that they're tracking. For service providers, it's a lot of time, workforce or DEI metrics, those sorts of things. So what you're tracking really depends on what your industry is. And again, that goes back to that materiality concept that we talked about. I will just make kind of a shameless plug here about, we have a program called the Green Masters program, and that is what we call our on-ramp to sustainability. So it's kind of the bridge between, we're just getting started and doing the EcoVadis or GRI reporting or something much more sophisticated. And that tool is open to any company, not just those in Wisconsin, but really it helps companies set up the systems that they need in those areas that are material to them, and then gives them access to ideas around best practices and performance improvement. And it's also a recognition program. So again, there are a lot of support tools out there if you're just getting started and wanting to know what data you need. That's a tool that can help. But then also just you know, the tricky thing about data can be that it's changing, right? If you're using equivalency metrics for greenhouse gas data, just make sure you're checking that you have the most updated equivalency metrics for your region or your location. That can get complicated fairly easily. So, get outside support where you need it. There are a lot of tools on the market these days that can help companies. Nate, I think your tool is one of those great ones. So, don't think you have to do it alone. Travis had mentioned that the sustainability world is very collaborative, and that's one of the things I love about it. So don't be afraid to reach out to other businesses and say, hey, what are you using for this? Or how are you doing this? That's a lot of what we do with our groups, is just facilitate that coming together and being able to share ideas and best practices. And, yeah, it's okay if your data is in a spreadsheet, but how do you make sure that your data is accurate and you don't have errors? So just talking through those with others sometimes is a beneficial part of the process. So,
yeah, a lot of great information there. You brought me back to when I had to be looking through the European versus the US-based GHG emissions factors for our first Scope 3 emission accounting. It is complex. None of what we've accomplished would have occurred without having great partners for us to collaborate with. I even got on weekly calls with one of our direct competitors so we can talk through our experiences and how we were coming to figures, because co-opetition does exist in this space, which is not so common. We're not necessarily going out to try to fight for our potential market share dollars in this case, right? This is really us trying to put the best foot forward from a sustainability perspective. Of course, we believe that that's going to help us remain competitive, be sustainable as a long-term operating organization. But I think that's great, Jesse. Travis, I'd love to hear from you as well, your experience working with data.
Very similar. Some call outs I would say is, really understanding what the data is stating before you're jumping to conclusions. So understanding the data accessibility, and as technology continues to evolve, more data will be more accessible. And so understanding that accuracy, but as it evolves, establishing and evolving with the data, and then establishing that time period of how often and what is the cadence I should be pulling this data. So just like any analytics, you have to understand what the data is representing, understand the accuracy and cleanliness of the data. Then from there, you can begin to standardize, warehouse, and pull the data in certain cadences, but continually auditing the data. And always, in my opinion, bringing a third party, bringing in someone who's less relevant or less close to the data and asking them, hey, is this making sense to you? How do you absorb this data, to give that secondary purview? And of course, we have a full suite of auditing processes that I'm probably less familiar with, and I would argue my broader ESG team can elaborate more on that front. But, I think the key piece here is standardizing the data, evolving with it, and understanding what it's stating, because as technology comes out, the data is more and more accessible. And you have to look back and understand, when you started this journey, what was accessible and what's accessible now, and how do you evolve against those metrics or those timelines or those statements or action items through that change of data accuracy and accessibility.
Yeah, to that extent, on many organizations' Scope 3 emissions accounting journey, compared to maybe Scope 1 or Scope 2, where you have your data on a Scope 3 side, often you don't. So you either need to work with the data that you have as a secondary or non-primary, but you can then advance and evolve your own accounting practices towards collection directly with your providers. I think that's where using some of the tools or partners like we're talking about through Gavadas can start to bear some fruit over time. And everything we're talking about from a data perspective is very much why when Redwood started interviewing our customers, something I was doing a couple of years ago, around what are some of your largest problems that us as a provider and partner want to come to the table to support you with. That's why we decided we're going to start with Redwood Hyperion, our emissions accounting platform. You move freight with Redwood, we want to give you your emissions for that freight. You operate off your own systems or one of our managed systems, we can integrate and provide you your complete freight footprint. It's a piece of your total emissions accounting, but it's a tough one to be able to gain access to and have trust in that data. So providing that sort of solution was something we felt was really important, and we've had great experience with and feedback from our customers on. I want to close out with one more question. Let's everyone get out our magic, our crystal balls here, and we're going to think about something in the future. What is something, let's say maybe 3 to 5 years in the future, if you could read that crystal ball, that really excites and engages you? Jesse, if you want to start.
Sure. So we are in a transition organizationally right now. We are 17 years old, and we've always had a sort of parent organization, and we are in the process of seeking our independence. So I kind of have this joke that we're almost 18. It's time for us to grow up. So, and like I said, our mission is accelerating the integration of sustainability. So it's really, when I look forward, I see more companies adopting sustainability as a core way of doing business, being strong environmental stewards, being strong, social stewards, meaning treating their employees well, treating their communities well. And that sort of just relates to our own success as an organization. I mean, part of this is so that, we can grow outside of the bounds of our geographical state and continue to impact businesses, sort of across the globe, really. So, I get super excited about that. And, we're here to help if anyone needs it or just wants to co-commiserate. I'm happy to do that too.
I love what that means for Wisconsin Sustainable Business Council and for all of your current and future companies that are going to be working with you on their journey and yours as well, of course. Mm-hmm. And Travis, we'll close out with you. What excites you and what's coming in the future?
3 to 5 years, that's a tough one. I've always stated or gained the perception that the future of mobility, be it commercial or individual, is a ride-sharing, autonomous, alternative fueling vehicle. How that comes to fruition, I'm not sure, but it really excites me to see further advancements in all technologies, both biodiesels to hydrogen to electric, but as well as the autonomous factor. And I'm really excited to see how that starts to play into the transportation world, how it plays into drone deliveries. We're scratching the surface. I can't read the crystal ball to say if it's in 3 to 5, but I do believe somewhere in the next decade plus, you'll start to see more autonomous, optimized truckloads of some nature riding on an alternative fueling vehicle, delivering our products. And I get really excited to continue to have this conversation.
I can see someone's been either keeping up with or maybe contributing to the Gartner hype cycles. If you didn't bring up drone delivery, I would have asked you if that was something also on your list. I think that's awesome. And I love to see where that future has in store for our industry and for us as shippers and providers, how we can continue to improve, optimize, provide the best level of services to our customers.
Definitely.
Well, we're going to wrap it there today. Thank you so much to our guests, Travis, Jesse, for taking your time out of your busy days to join us and for your insights. If anyone in the audience would like to hear any more from today's topics, feel free to connect with any of us on LinkedIn. If you're interested in hearing more about Redwood Logistics and our sustainability solutions that we offer, feel free to reach out to us through Redwood's website. Thank you for everyone for joining. Have an awesome day. Keep it green. Cheers.
Thanks, Nate.